always love it when we take the Glass House on the road and we go to places where ministry leaders are and we sit down and we just have cool conversations. At the Southern Baptist Convention this year, we got to do that. We put questions in front of people, cards where they could choose which of these discussions would you like to have with us? And then it was always fun to see which one they picked. I mean, how did you feel about it?
Oh, I loved it. I mean, we gave them a choice of 4. We had 2 different cards, sets of 4. And the question we're going to talk about today is, I think on the card we had said, what's wrong with your brain?
No, it was like, if you could change the way your brain works in one way.
No, I think it said, what's wrong with your brain? But we said it better like what you just said.
Well, what is wrong with your brain? Before we get to our guests, what was one thing you would change about your brain if you could?
Were you doing ladies first today?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Well, I have so many. So I can just start with one, and you and I have just recently talked about this. My brain has a remarkable way of unforgiveness and resentment. And so I wish that it was easier for me to forgive and forget. I can forgive. I do not forget. My brain is fantastic at remembering all sorts of details and numbers and people's names and all that. But also with that comes the ability to remember a wrongdoing to me. And so I wish I had a different brain that could just truly forget.
That's a good one. Yours is more spiritual and vulnerable than mine.
I always am.
Yeah.
You go to like coffee. I'm going to drink less coffee.
This is the way I describe it. Shopping carts have those grids where it holds the milk and the bread, but you can't put little items in there. They'll fall right through. I have a brain with a really wide grid that just doesn't hold anything small. I just wish I had a little bit smaller grid where I could remember a few more details. In ministry especially, it's really hard when you can't remember details and you have to rely on other people. Do you know how annoying it is to constantly ask my assistant, like, when are we doing that again? And she just told me.
Why don't we give an example?
Yeah.
Just yesterday, Heather sent Ben and I an email.
Heather's my assistant.
Heather's assistant. We were both on there. She said, I just wanted you guys to know. And Ben replied to all, maybe copy Lindley on this. And she and I were both like, well, what a great idea. That's why we're on here.
Classic example.
But that's not a very vulnerable thing about your brain.
Well, it's vulnerable in that I feel ashamed of it. Like sometimes people say things to me, I'm like, what is wrong with me that I cannot remember important things that are small? So let's see what other people think. We have 2 couples that are going to respond to this question. First is Brandon and Amy Peterson. Just want to remind you, this is at the SBC, so it's a little louder than normal, but you still get the full experience. So let's jump in and see what they have to say.
My name is Brandon Peterson, and I'm the Dean of Students and Vice President of Campus Life at Oklahoma Baptist University.
And I'm Amy Peterson, and I work with Ministry Wives in Oklahoma.
Very good.
Okay, so the question, what one thing you would change about the way your mind works if you could? So for me, I think being in ministry, one of the things that is easy to do is to think that people are coming at you sometimes when you're trying to do something and you know in your heart you're doing it for them and for their good, for the glory of God, but getting defensive is an easy thing. So if I could change that part of my brain to not get so defensive at times when we're trying to work together to accomplish something, that would be something I would change.
That's really hard, though. I mean, defensive, think about what it means trying to defend myself.
Right.
So someone's throwing a punch at me, and I'm supposed to not defend myself?
Right. Which that's kind of a natural, people get into that fight or flight, and so mine is fight. And so, and that would make it kind of more complicated and difficult at times when you're trying to accomplish.
Can I ask you a quick question? Over the years, how have you changed from what your previous version of yourself was?
That's a great question. I would say that as I've aged and matured, one, I've realized I don't invest so much personally that I take it so personally. I've learned to realize that it's bigger than me.
Yeah.
And quite frankly, not everything matters as much as what I thought it did to get so defensive in that first place. And they're really not coming after me. There's something behind them. And I think that would be the thing I would say, learning to understand they're coming at that with something, filters and history, baggage, that makes them respond that way.
And you just happen to be the person standing in the way.
That's exactly right.
Yeah, really good answer.
Yeah, and that's great training for marriage.
Yeah.
I mean, not being defensive when he feels like I'm coming at him or vice versa. And so ministry really is great training ground for marriage issues.
Are you fight or flight?
Oh, I'm flight.
Oh, you're flight.
Yeah.
Okay, because we're both fight.
Ooh, that's
So
fun.
it is fun.
Explosive.
Yes.
It's fun
But
for our
what's
kids.
funny, and he keeps saying this, is that through the years I've turned into a fighter.
Yeah.
And so for the little bit, tears would be my tool to shutting down, but now I just fight it. And so we can have some really lively conversations as you guys do.
Of course. Yeah.
So the question is, what would I change about my brain? I get really tired and fuzzy after so much stimulation. And so sometimes you have to push with ministry events, with continue to have same conversations with people.
Yes.
And I get tired.
Yeah.
And so early on in ministry, I would just keep pushing through. Now I give myself permission to have those times of rests, whether it's even just going to the bathroom in a church event and being there for a little bit longer than I need to be, just to have a breath.
Yeah.
And so I think that is something that I would have changed, but then it also gives me empathy and emotional equity when I talk to people. So
True story. Last year at the Southern Baptist Convention, 2 years ago, it was the last day. I needed to leave the room immediately. I was done. But we had to get back to our hotel, which was a hike. I'm walking by all these people who are stopping to see me, and Lindley would tell you, it was the rudest day of my life. I had nothing left. I was going.
You're not telling the truth. That what he did was he had his phone to his ear, but it wasn't on, and he was walking by. Right, of course they can't listen. And he was like, "Hey,
Sorry, I'm on
sorry,
the
I can't.
phone."
I'm talking."
It works great.
And yeah, I was like, "Who are you talking to?" He was like, "Nobody." Shh.
I did not have one more small talk conversation left in me. I was
get it.
done. So I'm the same way. Like I love people until I don't, but I'm gonna love them again. I just need a break.
yes.
Yeah.
Have you been able to identify what your limit is? Like, is it you can feel it in yourself, and do you respond to that?
Yeah. So this is my 4th convention as the president, or 3rd.
Fourth.
I'm learning, like, even last night, we had a full afternoon yesterday. I had preached in a church, and Tennessee baseball was on last night. It was really good to get room service and watch Tennessee baseball and not hang out.
Yes.
I woke up this morning ready to go. Previous years, I think I would have pushed through. And then by this moment today, I'm like flagging in relationships. So I think.
And I would be paying for it.
Yeah.
We-
And you have
What
your
happens?
limits too.
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
Lindley's
what's your
actually.
limit, Lindley?
Oh yeah.
Lindley shows more introverted than me, but she's actually more extroverted than me because I'm outwardly more energetic. People think I'm the extrovert. You're actually more extroverted than me.
I mean, I can handle small talk longer than he can. But I definitely have my limits. My limits begin to happen when people start saying stupid stuff. So I can tell when I start to get irritated by, things people are saying. I'm like, I'm going to excuse myself and I'll go back to the room and just check out. I mean, there's no specific, but I have my threshold for petty conversation and petty arguments. And so.
Yeah. That's good. It's interesting too within a marriage and ministry, being aware of each other's and having those conversations early on. How did those conversations go as you all were kind of educating each other?
Not well.
No, it was tough. Like, I remember we were church planners, setting up and tearing down, doing church. Like, by the afternoon, I literally did not want to see another human being. And yet all of our neighbors would be outside hanging out on a pretty Colorado day. And Lindley would be like, "Why are you avoiding the neighbors?" And I'm like, "I'm not avoiding the neighbors. I just don't like human beings for the next 12 hours." It's nothing personal.
I mean, we have if I'm hungry or tired, then I'm really, and so he knows it. He'll be like, "Do you need some food? Do you need to like some peace and quiet?" And his is with small talk. So
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so good to have those conversations, I think, because we've kind of learned it in ourselves as well. When we hit the limit, we need to bail, and being aware and honoring that in each other.
do you have the same limit? Or does one of you have a higher threshold?
I'd probably check out faster. I think kind of one of those things. I'm not as relational, and so I'm very task outcome oriented. And so when I don't see something of value in the conversation, I'm out. And so
Me too.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
and
I'd probably
I'm so
hit that limit
relational.
faster.
And relational interest drives me beyond what I can actually have. And so I'm interacting with people and I don't even know I've hit my limit until they walk away. And then I'm like, oh gosh, my eyes are stinging, my ears are ringing. I think I overdid.
The number of people that we interview that are now working for like a Christian college or a denomination, they're not on church staff anymore. That transition is really hard. Why do you think it's so hard, or why was it so hard for you?
Were you guys on a church staff?
Yes.
We were.
Okay, what serving in what role?
So we were in church ministry together for probably almost a little over 20 years. The last, I was an executive pastor for 13 years. I think my answer to that, and it can be healthy and unhealthy, but I think on the unhealthy side, I allowed my identity to really get completely defined by my role.
Yep.
And so when we left that, I mean, when you think about it, the church is a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
But everyone saw me and knew me as the executive pastor. When we left and we were just a church member Joe, nobody really cared. And it was a really difficult time to understand, who are we? What these people don't see our value. They don't know who we are. They don't know what we can do. And so it was a difficult transition. It took some time to just allow the Lord to help me understand personally, and your answer may be different, but personally, to see that my identity is way more than my role.
I think it's right on.
I think with Ministry Wives, we have so many open doors because of our husband's role. There's a beautiful expectation that comes and an invitation to serve the people. And so I had those with him for 20 years. And then when we were not, who am I? What is my role? What can I do? I love to teach God's word, but no one's asking me to, and no one even assumes that I know how to or love to do it. And so it was really difficult with not only my role, but also with my security. I thought that I had reached such a level of spiritual maturity that I was really confident. But it was only because I was confident within that setting because people knew who I was. And so then when I stepped out of a place where no one knew who I was or no one knew what I could offer, I was so anxious and just not knowing how to talk to people. I mean, it was a really weird setback that made me realize that it had a lot to do with where I was at, but more to do with the context of where I was serving. So that was hard.
You're in the room with two other really strong women, our producer Angie and Lindley. I want to ask this for them, asking for a friend. Were you resentful that your opportunities decreased when you were no longer attached to his role?
That's a very good question. Initially, yes. But here's what's interesting. Sometimes within Ministry Wives, we are limited or capped based on our husband's service. Meaning, within that area, I had open doors, but only within that area.
Yeah.
And so now, when we went to Oklahoma and he stepped out of church work, it was almost like I was a free agent as God would bring the opportunities along. And that's when Dr. Dilbeck reached out to me, and that's when I began to serve at the state convention level in Oklahoma, and then other opportunities came about. But I almost wonder if it was because I was no longer assumed that I was a part of his ministry. So I was resentful to a point, but then I also was like, when things started happening,
there's a sense of liberation of, now I can be known as Amy, and I'm not confined to Amy married to Brandon.
And I love that role. I love that identity. But you're right. It was liberating.
And it's on my side, it's more, it's fun to watch how she serves in the ways that she does and the opportunities now that she gets, even geographically outside of that, the confines of the area where we served in a church structure. So it's really cool.
That's really good. Anything you want to add to that, Lindley?
I'm processing a lot of that. I'm not there yet with the maturity that you have or the wisdom, so I'm processing that like, I should be more mature like that.
It doesn't.
What do you mean you're not there yet?
Well, I still have times where I resent you. I mean, you know that. Like, there's still times where I'm kind of like, man, you leaving Storyline, because I worked on staff there, like you took, in air quotes, my ministry, and then I was left here to do nothing, and Lifeway doesn't need me. And so I do still battle that some, even though I do have a role now with, I work with Visioneering Studios, who does architecture for churches. So, like, it's like a dream in some ways, but I still you know, there's some days that pop up.
Well, and it's new terrain for us where we go on a walk at night and she's talking about her world and I'm talking about my world, and they're not the same world.
Yes, that's a weird adjustment.
That's
Which is
really
hard
weird.
because
It
we've
is.
always known every
Yes.
family. He'd come home and say, "Man, I met with so and so, and this is what they're going through." And I knew them. We could pray for them.
Yes.
And so he'll say, "You know, I met with all the new Lifeway employees," and I'm like, "Oh, cool." Like, what do you want me to say about that? Like,
Yeah.
that's great.
And feeling left out
Yeah.
of that when we've been such partners
Yes.
in ministry together. So how have y'all been able to kind of work through that? Do you have like download times, or do you just kind of
Time.
Yes, Ben.
I think it takes.
How have
My
we?
advice to people who are in the struggle, I would say, give it more time.
Yeah.
I just think the identity piece you spoke of does not. You can't fix that overnight.
You can.
I think it takes years
It does.
to do the soul work to realize, okay, I had 99% of who I am tied up with that role.
Yep. Yep.
So I really have to ask myself the question, like, who am I apart from role? Because Scripture says I'm a child of God apart from role.
That's right.
And it takes time to unpack that. Counseling is, I think, a really
Love
important
that,
part.
yes.
Like just asking some exploratory questions
Yeah.
about why is this bothering me so much? And we're still working through that.
I mean, I think too, watching our kids get older and seeing how fast it goes is like, so even we've been wrestling the past 2 weeks of like, how much do I want to be involved even in my own work, in other stuff, because it's just flying by. And I'm becoming aware that a lot of my pride and identity is
Yeah.
wrapped up in like, well, what's my value? What's my worth? Are other people seeing that? And I'm like, in the meantime, our kids are flying through college, or I mean high school and stuff, and like I'm gonna miss it because I'm so worried about my value and my worth. So I'm having a whole like crisis of not, I mean, not a bad, but just the
Yeah.
like, wait, how much do I want to be giving to other people versus our home?
Yeah.
Yeah, you see the countdown happening
And if-
with
Yes,
the kids.
yeah, it's very real now. Like it's
Because your oldest is how old?
our oldest is going to be a junior in college. Our second is about to be a freshman in college, and then our other two are junior and senior in high school. So I mean, we're on this 2-year under our roof.
Oh my gosh, you have the TikTok.
Yeah, I mean, every year. I mean, we had one graduating, and on the same day got an email about the next one's senior pictures and stuff, and that's fine. Lots of people have that. It was just kind of like, it's fast.
Yeah.
And I'm out here trying to make a name for myself when my kids need me.
That's right. You know, one thing I would say too, kind of to that question about Amy on the resentment piece, the pastor that I served in South Carolina, when we went there, he said this to me, and I think it was applicable when we went as much as it is when we left. And he just said, Brandon, remember, your wife is kind of the loser in this deal. You get a new job, you get new purpose,
Yep.
you get a new location. You immediately have people that are going to look to you and want to follow you. Your wife is leaving her friend base, leaving her comfort base, leaving whatever. So just keep that in mind. And I think it's true on both sides of that to have that in perspective when
Totally.
you're thinking through that.
Yeah.
I deal with a lot of shame about the pain she has endured. It's kind of like back in your dating days, it's easier to be broken up with than to break up with someone. Because if you break up with someone, you've got to ask yourself for the rest of your life, should I have broken up with you?
Yeah.
So it was ultimately my decision. And I have to be the one that bears the weight of that. And so the leadership role, even in family, sometimes is a burden because, like, man, I now have to live with the consequence of that.
Yes.
And every time she feels or has a bad day, it's hard for us to have a healthy conversation around it because it activates shame in me of like, I did this to you.
It's my fault.
So I can't empathize with her because I'm now all up in my own stuff.
So true.
So then I feel
good.
like I'm hiding my emotions because I don't want to say my true feelings. Like I'm sad because I don't want to make him shameful.
Exactly.
But then I don't have anyone to talk to, and so it's that crazy
Yeah.
cycle.
And on the opposite of that, if I have a great day at Lifeway, I have to kind of dial that back
It's
because
not
I don't
great.
want her to think I'm having a great time.
Yeah.
And we've talked through this in other episodes. It really is, I think, in transition, an emotional battle.
It is.
It is. And then to come out on the other side where you're on the same page and with all the scars and bumps and bruises that happen.
Yeah.
It's hard. That transition is hard. And even the conversation between husband and wife is difficult. Even moving from church to church to church. I mean, that's a whole another thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How are we going to discern that God is leading us, and what happens if you want to and I don't?
Yeah.
And that conversation.
Yeah.
And we've been in situations
that's a
like
whole
that,
other
and it
story.
was that was hard.
Do you remember a moment when you felt like, I think I've healed? because you said you're different now than you used to be. Was there an event or something that happened you're like, that didn't hurt like it used to?
That's a great question. Time, I think, has been the best because I frequently go see my girlfriend still in South Carolina, the place that we left. And the first time it stung and it hurt. And there was familiar and there was almost like a bodily response, even though I thought I had worked past it more than my body was telling me I had. But over the years, because it's been, 6 years since we came back to Oklahoma, over the years, it's gotten better. But I think the fact, there's that tension piece when you're still in the waiting or even the wondering of is God doing anything and what is he doing? And so once kind of an opportunity and opportunities came for me, it helped me cling to that. So I wonder if I didn't have a number of opportunities that I've had that I'm really enjoying and really feel fulfilled in, if I would still be in that tension place, if I'd still be in that place of resenting him. But the Lord has really opened up some great doors. And so,
So it sounds like when a new opportunity came,
I think
that
so.
excited you.
And I wish it were me just solely having that aha
Just
emotional
maturity in the Lord.
Because when you said maturity, I was like, oh, I don't think so. But I think through that process, there was a breaking of that needed to happen. There was humility that needed to be sewn into so many of those layers of fabric of even the way that I served the Lord. But once the opportunity came, I think I was able to say, now I see what God was doing. Now I see the hard that brought us to Oklahoma really has been fruitful for me.
Yeah.
And that's made it easier. I don't know if that hadn't happened, if I would still be in that hard place.
And I'd say, how people talk about sometimes you need some windshield time, they're talking about driving to think and whatever. I would say it's kind of like you need some rear view mirror time as well, because it's usually not until time passes, you look back on an event and you then look to try to see the faithfulness of God or the goodness of God. And as we look at things that have happened in our boys' lives, when you look in the rearview mirror, it's not like you're trying to get back to the past. You're just taking the time to start seeing how things connect and how God has truly worked. And then if you can recognize that, you can settle in that a little bit, and that helps.
On my hardest days, we moved. Our daughter went to UT. Well, she's met this boy. They're, very serious, probably going to get married and talking that direction. And that's one of the things I'm like, she would have never gone to UT. And, it's not that she wouldn't have met a man at a different college, but I'm like, our sacrifice or my sacrifice to come here, put them on a trajectory for her to meet this boy. Our kids have had a good experience. So, that is the saving grace for me that. The kids have had a good experience.
And we have a lot more fried chicken.
I love fried chicken. I do.
Let's not underestimate the
Every
priorities.
time I have a bad day, I go get this fried chicken that's my favorite, and I send them a picture, and I'm like, nobody text me. I'm eating my fried chicken.
Whenever she's mad, she sends the family a picture of fried chicken.
Yeah. I'm like, nobody bug me while I'm eating my dark meat fried chicken.
Here's the last thing I want to say this. When people ask me what it's been like to move from local church life to roles like ours, here's the best metaphor I've found. Maybe you guys have a better one. It's kind of like in old school battle when there were soldiers at the front lines on horses. The wind was in their hair. Their guns were loaded. It was high action, adrenaline. That to me is like working at a local church. It's like life on life. You form great relationships because you're right there in the trenches together, and it's really a sweet, sweet role. But then about a mile back from the front line, there's a couple of people under a tent looking at maps. And they have to decide who's going what way and with what weapons. Somebody has to do that.
Yeah.
Somebody's uniquely gifted to do that. They probably used to be out in the front lines and miss being around the campfire telling stories. That's, to me, what denominational leadership is like. It's a calling where you've begun to understand somebody has to fill these roles, and it's a calling.
That's good. That's a great analogy.
Yeah.
So when we're recruiting people to come to Lifeway, one of my favorite things to say is like, look, if you don't absolutely feel called to this, I mean, you have a passion to do this. Do not give up your church staff position, because you will resent it. Your spouse will resent it. You have to feel called.
So true.
And that's why we want to create an episode around this, because I think there's a number of denominational leaders that have worked through this that each have a little something to say about how to prepare for it.
Right.
Yeah.
I have a lot of conversations like that. That's
Yeah.
good.
Good stuff.
That's
You guys are
good.
great to me. I can't
Well,
believe this
thank
is
you.
our first time hanging out.
know.
It's so fun.
Yeah.
Really.
Well,
so
thanks for
grateful.
introducing. I'm so glad we got to have that conversation about transition from pastoral ministry to denominational work or Christian ministry, because it really is a huge topic that we tackle a lot with folks out in state conventions and denominational roles. So it was really special to have that with them.
Next up is Matt and Julianne Longworth. So they go to Forest Hills Baptist Church with us. They are on staff at the church we attend. And we saw them at the convention and pulled them in pretty quickly because they're a really fun young couple. They have 2 small kids. They're in like the throes of parenting and ministry and all the things. And so we knew that they'd have good answers they actually answered the same question. That's why we put them together.
We're live at the SBC, and we have one of our favorite couples who go to church with us here in the booth. You guys introduce yourselves real quick.
Yep, I'm Matt Longworth. I'm the college and young adult pastor at Forest Hills Baptist Church in Nashville, and this is my
And
wife.
I'm his wife, Julianne Longworth. I've been at Forest Hills since I was 3, so I was there before him.
That's right.
Actually.
Yeah.
So
You predated
Lifelong
him.
Forest
that's
Hills
right.
person.
That's right.
That's
Well,
funny.
thank you guys for what you do in our church.
Absolutely.
Your staff position is so important, and everything that has been put under you, Matt, grows. It really has. God's really blessing your ministry. And so we saw you guys walking by, we're like, we got to get them.
We're in this like glass cage here, and we saw them. I was like, stop them.
Yes. So we put 4 cards in front of the Longworths, and we said, pick one that you want to talk about. And they picked their brains. So the question is, let me read the question.
Yeah, the question is, what is one thing you'd change about the way your mind works if you could? So who wants to start?
Yeah, do you want me to start?
I think you should.
All right, so that's a tough question, and I think I'm overanalyzing it already. So maybe that's what I need to change, is that I'm already overanalyzing
That's
it.
an
And
issue
so-
for a lot of people.
That's
Yeah,
right.
and so I think I overthink things. And so even within ministry context as well, in college ministry, for example, there's a lot of things where maybe I want to do, but I overthink it, or maybe I get sometimes too much input from people, and then
Yeah.
it clouds the brain where I can't make a decision fast enough.
That's really good.
And so I'm always thinking about, okay, what is the other person? You know, I'm a people pleaser by nature,
Okay.
and so I'm always asking and thinking, okay, what do the college students want, or what does this person want, instead of just being clear in the direction and goal that I want to go. And so I think overanalyzing is something I would change. I don't think that's a bad thing,
Yeah.
a negative thing, but I think that's something that I would change about how my brain works. And that even goes into our marriage
Yeah.
a lot. I always overanalyze maybe what she's thinking, or the plans that we're trying to put in place, or things like that. And so that's probably something I would change in my brain. Yeah.
I gave Ben a sign years and years ago. It said, never confuse the will of God with the will of the majority, because you can tend to do that, like get material from people. And I'm like, hey, who is God calling you to be? Like, what
That's
is
right.
God telling you to do within the context that you're serving? Because you're a good leader. Like you have good intuition and you have good judgment.
Yeah, but I want to say what makes a good leader is being collaborative.
I agree with
That's
that.
the
You're right.
challenge. Is like
You're right.
at some point it stops being collaborative, and you're almost wanting other people to make a decision for you that you don't want to have to make
That's
yourself.
right. That's right.
So that's where the courage piece comes in. I've heard from everybody. We still have disagreement. I need to make the call.
That's
Those
right.
are hard moments.
They are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what I probably struggle with the most, is those decisions in there. And so, but that's where the overanalyzing comes. I think about all their decisions that I've been fed, and it's hard for me to make one. And so, yeah, I like that, discerning the will of God versus the
Not
will of the majority. That's really good.
Good. Julianne, what
Great.
would you
Right.
say?
Yes. So as he was answering, I was listening, but I was also thinking. I would say that, number one, I feel like I always think, well, what are other people going to think if I make this decision or that decision? So, for example, we have 2 little kids at home, and so if I don't go to one of his events, how does that reflect on me, on us as a married couple, and I want the young adults and college kids to know me, and our kids, and they do, because you can't go to everything,
Yeah.
but you choose, what you can do. So I feel like that's been a little bit of something that
Very
has come up
interesting you bring
since
that up.
children.
The last pastor's wife that sat in that seat said the same thing.
Exact
Really?
same thing.
Wow.
Yeah.
She said that there's just a guilt trip about not going to things that she has to tackle.
Well, she
Yeah.
answered the what you don't understand question and what she wished people understood. And she said, I'm a mom first. I have to serve my family
That's right.
first.
Right.
And add in, other things within ministry context.
And
So-
people are really understanding, and they
yeah.
they totally get it, because I've had people come up to me and say, thank you for everything you do, because he couldn't do some of the stuff if you weren't pulling your load.
That's right.
You know? And I'm like, well, that is very true, even
Yeah.
though you don't feel like it in the moment.
Yeah.
That is very true. So that's
great.
what I would say.
Have you guys done the Patrick Lencioni stuff about the 6 types of working genius?
I have at our
No.
ministers' retreat a couple months ago.
I would love to know how you guys are different, because what Lencioni says is there's 6 different pieces of work. Some people like to be high level where the ideas are being born. Some people like to be at the finish line where things are getting executed. Lindley and I are polar opposites in that, like, I love to philosophize, talk about
Yep.
ideas.
Yep.
Too much
Well,
of that
actually,
wears her out.
Our middle 2 are the exact same, which is funny. So his top 2 are my bottom 2.
Interesting.
My top 2 are his bottom 2, but our middle 2. So I do think that's why we work well together, in that his
Balance
gifts
each
are
other.
my weaknesses and vice
Yes.
versa. But then the middle ground, we do really work well together.
That's what makes you a good helpmeet.
That's why I like to fan into flame Ben's gift. That's what I'm here
Lindley
for.
loves the term helpmeet.
Help me. Yes. Yeah.
So
Awesome.
most pastors and wives I've found are on the opposite side of the spectrum. Like, that's what draws us to each other.
That's
is
right.
that there's a dreamer and then there's a detail guy.
We would probably
person.
be that. I'm definitely the dreamer.
Dreamer,
I'm
over
very
there.
similar to you, where
Yep.
I have lots of ideas, and I think they're great.
All
I
of
think
them
I
are
have
equally
lots of-
great.
Every
But
yeah.
getting the action steps to get there,
Yeah.
that's where the decision, going back to decision making, that's where it's hard for me to be, like, I need people to help me make these decisions.
It's good.
But ultimately, it does fall on me to make the decision at some point.
Yeah.
But I love the dream. Then she's more of the, okay, let's stop talking
Yes.
about it, and let's just go do it. And so, which
Or
is great. It's a good balance.
let's do what we can. We can't do all those things.
That's
Yeah.
right.
Yes.
You know?
Baby steps.
Yeah, I have about 7 things I want to do, and she's like, let's just focus on one thing.
Yeah.
And
That's
it's
really
really
good.
It's helpful.
Also interesting, our last couple, she was a teacher. And so they had picked the planner or fly by the
Oh,
seat of
yeah.
your pants. And
Yeah.
she was like, we are a planner.
Yeah.
Because teachers have to.
That's right. And speaking of, I mean, this morning, so I'm going from one school to another right now.
Okay.
So my mind is constantly racing, and he has had to talk me down because I'm looking at the future. You know, it's June, but I have to report at the end of July, and it's like you had to take on my role for a second.
I did, yeah.
You know, bring me down. So I mean, again, you complement each
balance.
other.
Yeah.
That's right. When one's struggling, the other one steps up.
Perfect.
So-
Can I throw another question in here real quick?
Oh, yeah, go.
Yeah.
This is not on there. What's the hardest part about staying in a hotel with Matt? I was actually thinking about this morning.
I have an answer.
What is
I
it?
did
Really?
not have
That
to
was
think.
quick.
So he is all about working out right now.
Very
So,
good.
I mean, his alarm goes off, and I mean, I wake up,
Yep.
and then I can't go back to sleep.
He wants to get up and work out
so
early.
he got up
That's
at
right.
6.
Yeah.
Wasn't it 6?
No, 6:45.
Okay. Well,
and
Felt
you're
like,
thinking,
felt like 6. Felt like
Yeah.
5.
so
Yeah, it did.
yes, that's the struggle.
It is true.
because he always wants to do stuff.
this is
I'm
why
like,
we like
let's-
Airbnbs,
Yes.
where you can have some separate space.
That's right.
Which we have not really been to, maybe once.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
Yeah,
that,
Lindley,
that's my answer.
What's the hardest part for you
Oh,
about
this
staying in a
is
hotel with
easy,
me?
Easy. Ben likes to use every corner of the hotel room for shoes, clothes, dirty
I don't have
clothes,
to clean
clean
it up.
clothes. Every
spread it out.
He just
Oh.
spreads it everywhere, and I'm like, okay, can we just have one pile for dirty
It's so
clothes?
true.
Can we have one area for your shoes? Like,
Well, that counter over there looks lonely. I should put my lanyard over there.
Yes,
And then I
right.
should put my
Something's
shoes over
there.
here.
I know. I
Yeah.
know how you work. I just,
Do you know, I actually this morning, as you were getting ready, I thought I should consolidate some things. She'll think I'm amazing. And I did it.
There you go.
well, I think you're amazing then.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks, guys.
That's
Yeah,
it.
thanks for
Yes.
coming on. Thank you.
The Glass House is executive produced by Angie Elkins, edited and engineered by Donnie Gordon with help from Nathan Howard. Show notes and production help from Nikki Ogden. Photography by Emily Bergeron and Bailey Watley. Recorded at the Lifeway Podcast Studio in Brentwood, Tennessee.